Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello, it's good to be with you this evening. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the Executive Director and President of Emerald Planet in Washington, D.C., USA. Thank you for being with us. We're going to be talking about natural resources, the conservation and the destruction of these natural resources around the globe. As we've talked about in past television programs, almost 2 billion people, almost 1/3 of the population of the entire globe, do not have access to adequate water, health care, education, and power. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about is how natural resources directly relate to power and all the other needs that we have, because we need to look at this from the standpoint of sustainability as we go through into the 21st century. So instead of using up these natural resources, we need to make sure that we're renewing and allow future generations to be able to enjoy the quality of life, and actually more than that, to have an increase in the quality of life while we protect the environment. We have a very young man with us this evening that's going to lead off as far as our guest, Larry Silverman, who is an attorney. Larry, thank you for being here.
Great to be here, Sam.
He is a young man, although he's been practicing law and a professor and many other things for about 40 years now, I think.
Yeah.
And he's very active with the bar in Washington, D.C. and surrounding jurisdictions. And also he's a professor for environmental law and policy at Johns Hopkins University, the Washington, D.C. branch. So Larry, thank you for being with us, and just tell us a little bit of your background, how 40 years ago, because you were really a pioneer in those days, would you get involved in environmental law and policy?
Well, I'm one of the few environmental lawyers I know who never took an environmental law course, because the University of Pennsylvania, where I went to law school, didn't offer them at the time.
Oh, so you really were ahead of the curve then.
Yeah, I was. I got my first job out of law school with Ralph Nader, so he set me on the path, and I have not been able to get off of it since then, and had a chance to work on the first Clean Air Act, first Clean Water Act, and many subsequent things. Not that I mean, I played a small part, but I played a part, and it's nice to be part of that.
Well, going back 40 years, and the work that you were doing in those days, that really set the nomenclature, the terms, the philosophy, the terminology that we're using here in the 21st century. And without those early pioneering days, and probably kind of stumble-bumbling along and creating things, it would not be possible where we are in the 21st century.
Well, I had a great asset of being sort of ignorant. I think if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have even tried. But not knowing a lot, you just sort of look at problems and see, oh gosh, this air pollution is killing people.
Right, and of course in those days, I can remember well in the early 70s where you had many of the rivers in the United States and around the globe, spontaneous combustion, they would catch on fire.
Right.
And I know when I was living in Ohio, the Akron and Youngstown, those places, they said they would have anywhere from 5 to 7 fires a day on the rivers there because of all the chemicals and the pollutants that were going in. No fish,
right,
were all dead. So in many ways, we've made tremendous strides over these last 40 years.
Yeah, we prevented a real catastrophe from happening here in our country.
Tell us a little bit, Larry, about your practice. Maybe one of the two of the ideas that that you remember now that you really worked on in those early days that now have come to fruition.
Well, right now, mostly I do legislative work. I'm a lobbyist. I work for towns that have
that big L word.
That big L word, but I'm on the right side. Represents cities that maybe have Superfund sites that need to get cleaned up.
Okay.
Or they.
And now, what is a Superfund?
A Superfund
because many people listening will not know what a Superfund is.
That's fair enough. It's there's all over the country. There are thousands, tens of thousands of sites where people have dumped very hazardous waste in places they don't belong, and then abandoned them. And then the question is, what do you do with these? They need to be cleaned up, and there's a program created for them called the Superfund program. The idea was there'd be lots of money, but of course there's not lots of money. Not now, there was for a while, but it's sort of slowed down, particularly under the last administration.
And it's not only cities, counties, and also out in extreme rural areas, but also many of the military bases, have a large number of these dumps there as well.
Yeah, here in Washington, D.C., the Washington Navy Yard, which is the oldest Navy Yard in the country, has had some of those problems. They're working on them. They're making progress.
Now, in working with the Congress, and I would assume you also work with local jurisdictions and also the states, what is the process? You know, everybody thinks of lobbyists and they go, ooh, lobbyists. No, not a lobbyist. Right. But actually, lobbying is a very honorable profession. It's very helpful in the legislative process, at least as it's evolved in the United States. So how do you help to protect the environment and advance the cause of climate change through that effort?
Well, the First Amendment gives you the right to petition your government for redress of grievances. So I've been petitioning for redress of grievances for a very long time. There are lots of grievances around. I think the first thing is you've got to sort of get the attention of the people who make decisions. That's hard to do. Typically, when you go to a congressman's office, they have two questions. Who are you, and what do you want?
And probably the third is how much money you're looking for.
Well, they always know you're looking for some.
Right.
And you've got to sort of have answer those questions. And my approach to lobbying is to make lobbyists out of my clients. If I represent a conservation organization or a city or a small business, I try to educate them on how to approach the Congress or the agencies. Timing is very important, because if you make the most eloquent argument 10 minutes after they voted on it, it's sort of a waste of time.
Right.
So on the other hand, if you get there too early, they're so busy. Oh, we have plenty of time for that. So you really have to follow this stuff. And I watch C-SPAN a lot, and I hang around, and I read a lot of newsletters, and I try to sort of get the drift. What's the market doing today?
So you're trying to, it's just like in many professions now, you're trying to anticipate where the legislation or where the body politic may be going, and it's just like one of the notions of leadership: find a parade and get in front of it.
Get in front of it. That's right. And and also sort of how do you cast your interest? You have an interest. You need to understand what you want. I think the biggest problem I have with a lot of my clients is they don't quite know what they want. What are you asking for?
So you're trying to define the terms, trying to define what it is that they really, the goals and objectives.
Right, what they really need. And then you have to redefine it in terms of, well, what's the Congress doing? Well, they're passing an energy bill. Well, but we have a water problem. Well, that's not unrelated. And so what's the connection?
Right.
And how do you make that connection? Oh, we have a security problem. Well, if one of these chemical plants in your town blows up, that's a Homeland Security issue. So that's a good time to raise that when they're talking about Homeland Security.
Well, part of your background also, which is very interesting to me because of my travel abroad extensively, is that you've done this work for 40 years in the United States, but also you've been doing quite a bit of work with a very small and isolated country called Nepal, which is the rooftop of the world on the border between India and China, which is a very volatile area. And we have a couple of slides that we're going to show, and let's have this bridge. Why work all these years in the United States, and all of a sudden, here you are in Nepal?
Well, for one thing, it makes me feel young. Right now, if you look at the environmental law in the United States, it's voluminous. It's so big. I went to a bar association meeting, and a lawyer from the Justice Department was saying that this year there were 25,000 enforcement actions. And I participated in the first enforcement action, which was...
Oh my goodness, number one.
Number one. That was many years ago, so there's a lot going on, but it's nice to go with a clean canvas, and you can take a country, you go to Russia or Nepal or a place like that, they're not starting from scratch, but they're pretty close.
Let's bring up this first slide. We have a young man that you've been working with in Nepal, and you're going to tell this story, and then we're going to come up with the several other slides. Just give us a little idea about who this young man is, what he represents, and then we'll carry forward with the next slide.
Well, one of his friends, a fellow named Amir Pudel, was a student in my class at Johns Hopkins. We were teaching public lands law about parks and forests.
Now, how long ago was this?
This was about 3-4 years ago.
Okay, all right.
And I have the students pick a favorite park and then do reports on it. So Amir would do reports on beautiful parks and forests in Nepal. And I said, you know, Amir, what you guys need is an NGO, a non-profit organization, to be an advocate for these parks and forests that you care so much about. And that was the end of that. And then he graduated. And then 2 years later, he called me in Washington. He said he's visiting town. He said he'd like to start up that nonprofit.
And we have, I think, we have a scene from that that location that he was talking about.
Yes.
And I would assume this is probably glacier water. It's coming out of the high Himalayas.
Yes, the Himalaya mountains, the Himalayas, they say over there, they are the source of, they provide water, the primary source of water for 20% of the people on planet Earth.
That's incredible, isn't it?
So all the great rivers of Asia, the Mekong, the Brahmaputra, the Ganges, they all start either in Nepal or Bhutan or Tibet, way up in the high mountains. And there are great glaciers there too.
Right.
Which are melting.
And they're receding now.
They're receding at a tremendous
pace. Very
pace.
rapid rate, because I was in Bhutan 2 years ago now, and when meeting with the Minister of the Environment, he says the greatest fear we have is these glaciers are going to be gone and we'll have no water, because rainwater cannot replace the melting water from the glaciers.
Yeah, the glaciers, they're great storage reservoirs of water, of fresh water on Earth, and the ones in the Himalayas are receding even faster than the ones in the Arctic.
Well, what's the significance of this forestry college we have here in Kathmandu? What's the nature of forestry in these regions, and why is it such an issue?
Some of these young folks from Nepal asked me to help them sort of organize an advocacy organization and so forth. So not knowing anything about Nepal, I thought I'd teach a course on it. So we offered the first online course from Johns Hopkins on that it was ever taught in Nepal. And we had Nepali students and we had Johns Hopkins students. And the idea was to create a dialogue between us. It was very difficult because there are many technical problems, and 8 hours a day they had no electricity and so forth and so on. And these were younger students and mine were graduate students, and we had a lot of problems, but you know what, we communicated. And I had a co-teacher over there, Dr. Mohan Wagley, a brilliant man. And we were able to really, I was able to learn. I learned the most, but I think everyone who participated learned a lot about forestry and agriculture in Nepal and some of the problems over there.
And also the water and other issues.
Yeah, and you realize if you're, when you study these things, that the drinking water supply for a large part of the Earth, it's really, with the glaciers melting, all these problems, one of the most important things you have to do is to protect the forests.
And we're going to end with that. Larry J. Silverman, Esquire, meaning attorney with environmental law in Washington, D.C., a professor at Johns Hopkins University. We'd like to thank you for being with us, Larry. And we're showing you many ideas about what is going on in the world as far as natural resources, water, forestry, land, and air. So thank you for being with us on the Emerald Planet. We look forward to being with you again. Thank you for watching.